is my version, and ask me if you have any questions. So here is our like architecture figure of ChatGPT from Hugging Face blog, right? So here you can see everything is a neural network. So a lot of these things are neural networks and the neural networks. But this picture is fairly complicated. Let me break it down for you. First, on this side, we have the initial language model, right? Our large language model based on transformers, right? So we give it some text, the prompt, and it will produce the next word, the next word. A dog is the furry mammal, right? So that's what it's going to do. So that's the so-called pre-trained large language models. The problem of these pre-trained large language models is if you give it a text, it will always try to continue that text in its logic. So if you give it a question, it's not going to give you an answer. It's not going to be conversational. So that's the first innovation that OpenAI did to make it really usable by everyone. So this is so-called instruction fine-tuning, right? So what it does, instead of just relying on the pre-trained large language model to do the generation, it OpenAI then fed it with a larger amount of pairs of questions and answers, and fine-tuned this model. So basically use the new input data to readjust the parameters in this deep learning model. So now this model, these parameters are updated. Now the model, the fine-tuned model will follow instructions. When you give it a question, it will provide an answer. And if you want to just chat with it, it will try to be conversational. So they use a large amount of these question and answer pairs to fine-tune the model. So now the model can produce answers when you have questions, right? But still, it's not great in that it will try to say always generate longer answers or not the ones that human prefers. So what they did, another innovation that they did is this so-called human preference fine-tuning. And when OpenAI did it, they did it with reinforcement learning. So they call it reinforcement learning with human feedback, RFHF, right? So what what they did, what they did was using this instruction fine-tuned model, yeah, to generate answers. So for each question, generate two answers, and let a human to pick which one is the better one. And sometimes when you are using ChatGPT, they are still doing that, right? Sometimes they generate two answers and let you pick which one you feel is better. So that part for sure, they are connecting the data and use that to fine tune their model. So that's the so-called human preference fine-tuning. So if you open it up of their process, what they do is they use the people's clicks to train a reward model, and then through a reinforcement learning updates, put the reward model back to the instruction fine-tuning model. So that's how they did this with reinforcement learning with human feedback. Last year, like end of last year in the NIPS 2023, there is a paper saying you don't really need this process because other people try to replicate OpenAI's reinforcement learning with human feedback, and rarely they had any success. So they found it's very hard to replicate what OpenAI did. So this paper, so-called direct preference optimization, basically says you don't need that as long as you use the choice of humans from the like options. It will be able, you can directly fine tune the model and update the parameters, and you are going to have similar like outcomes. So now most of the open source, at least the open source models are fine-tuned, are trained with this direct preference optimization, so that people are getting quite stable results from this. So that's how ChatGPT is built. We start with the pre-trained large language model, and we make it conversational using instruction fine-tuning, and we make sure the output is like geared towards human beings using human preference fine-tuning. So if now people ask you about ChatGPT, how ChatGPT is made of, now you can talk about the main component that OpenAI did to make it work. So even though it's not like the fundamental transformer architecture change, I think this is pretty big innovation. Like before then, those large language models are academic subjects, right? No one really like normal people like you and me, we like as a researcher, I heard about these language models, and I sit in committees where students work on this, but that's not my research area, so I'm not following the details. But it's their innovation, OpenAI's innovation, made it a tool that everybody can use. Now natural language become our interface with computers, with programs. I think that's the big contribution they made in this space. Really enable a normal person to be able to use these tools, use these sophisticated large language models.